Okay, this movie's going to be a kind of a two-part one. One is I'm going to show how to do a simple rotation path, and the other one is how to get a pure white background. Some environments will yield a pure white background. This one's really pretty good. It's just that the shadow right here is coming down, and it's a telltale way you can see the edge of the view. Otherwise, this is seamless into the white background, which is always nice. The other thing that I notice on this one is that it's not centered. So it looks like the center of rotation is right about here on the edge of the ring. So the ring is actually going out and around. And that comes from using this builder right here, which is the, let's go ahead and roll this up. This is the animation builder, and this is the old one. And this is where sometimes you, well, you can either spin the ring or have the ring spin, the camera spin around the item. And it looks like to me, because of the way this view is changing this much with the black, that the camera is actually spinning around the ring. I could be wrong, but that's kind of the look you get when because if the ring was spinning, then this big black part wouldn't appear, because the ring would always be at the same angle compared to the environment. Whereas when we fly around the environment with the camera moving, then different parts of the environment are exposed. So there's what I have to say about that. So now I've got a model similar to that one, just in the sense that I put animation test on there. Now here's another thing that I do that makes for a better looking animation, and that is any edge that I can easily fillet, like these outside edges and these inside edges, any edge that I can fillet I do, because filleting makes a ring look polished and it makes it more realistic. Now the beauty of that is that on this model I went ahead and simply filleted the profile. So there was really no filleting going on other than right here at the curve level. So I swept this dark green surface with the filleted profile. Okay. So having done that, let's go out, and the first thing I want to do is light this scene according to what I want. So let's go ahead and click here, and I'm going to drag this builder over here so that I get a little more real estate over here. So I've made this white gold, I made these yellow, and what it really comes down to is the scene. Now if you use the default scene here and you don't change one, and what I mean by scene is the HDR environment, if you use that, then you're going to get some really stark, and I don't use this one much. So we immediately want to change scenes. I'm partial to Blur Studio 2. But it will yield a dark spot, and of course we could go in and rotate the environment about and get rid of that dark spot, but it's still, I don't mind some contrast, but this is pretty dark here. So on animations, especially because they're moving and they'll look shiny anyway, I a lot of times will tend towards Box Studio. So let's hit that, and then let's go ahead and shade that up. Now Box Studio on its own is kind of lifeless. There is some highlight here, but a lot of dark here, and it's just kind of, there's not much contrast. So what I immediately do is come over to Options, and I would go to the Environment tab, and then I'm going to up the multiplier. Okay, so the multiplier says how light the environment is, and I'm going to up this to around 3, somewhere around 3.2. So now it's very bright, and let's go ahead and close that, and let's hit render again. So now the overall scene is brighter, the highlights are brighter, it's not as gray, and I'm going to call that good. Now you will notice by making that environment that much brighter, So now what we'll do is we'll address the background. Now, by driving this up, the environment, it made this very light, and it is essentially pure white. But to ensure that it's going to be pure white, I actually changed the ground plane material. So here's what we'll do. Let's go over to ground planes, and let's go down to white matte and assign it. Well, let's assign it to an actual object. That'll help. I don't know if I did that or not. Okay, then I'm going to go over to the material editor, and here's white matte. Now, it is made up of, oh, you know what? I think let's go ahead and nuke this. I was already messing with this. Let's assign that again. So here's white matte, go. All right, now let's go over to material editor, white matte. Okay, here's how it looks. This should be a small m. There's not much going on in maps. Nothing in options. Diffuse colors white. If we click the small m to go over and load a texture editor. So right now there's nothing here in the preview because the type is none. I'm going to switch this over to A color. A color is just a constant color that you can make for a material. In other words, if we click here and go to red, then we'd get a constant red color as the material. Okay? The reason I like to do this is because it has a multiplier associated with it. So, if we come over to white, okay, and hit update, so yep, it's white. Multiplier is at 1, apply. So now, let's, I'm just going to move this out of the way, and let's hit render now. Okay, it should look very similar, if not the same. I think I see a little more shadow here. It's hard to tell if I'm compressing the movie. Sometimes the render suffers. So now what we can do is go back to the M, and we can increase the multiplier up to like 1 1/4. Actually, let me do it a lot so you can see it. Let's go 1.6. No need to reapply the material because when you change a material that's already been applied, it automatically is already applied. Kind of makes sense when you say it out loud. Okay, so now let's render that, and there you can see the brightness that material is putting into the scene. Okay, so that's too much, as I knew it would be. But that's what it's doing. So it acts like a light, really. The A color does. And so I'm going to go back down to about 1.2. Apply. And close that. And let's hit render again. Okay, so it is brighter, and now you can see that the shadow is just hanging out just under the object. It's not as big a shadow, and this is definitely pure white. No doubt about it. Okay, so there's what I like to do for white. Now, we'll come over to the, and it's always good when you're setting up for an animation, always do a render and check it. Because it sets up all the parameters for the size, for the environment. You know everything is working now. So let's go back to, instead of this one that I showed at the beginning of the movie, we're going to use the new Object Animation Builder. And we'll wait for that to open. It takes just a moment to open. There it is. Hopefully this will fit in my movie. Okay. The Save To is the My Documents Matrix 6 animation, and I'll call this Test. Okay, and the format to save it in, BMP is just fine. No compression on a BMP, so I like those. Okay, I like the angle that I've chosen for my animation. So, I am going to say, Edit, Use Current Viewport Camera and Target. Alright, there we go. So now it makes a new viewport and it matches these numbers for the viewport dimensions. So what you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Alright, so there's that. There's the T for target. We can see that. Over here is where the camera is. So it's looking at it at this angle, which is certainly true. Okay, so now we're going to go over and I'm going to grab the ring itself, all the pieces of the ring, and that's my object. Okay. There we go. Alright. So now we've got the object in the box, and we want to do a rotate, and we want to do a simple rotate. So let's turn this on, and here's the way that I keep track of what these X, Y, and Z do. Basically, if we look over here, we've got the X, and I consider this a handle. Okay? And so right now, if I grab the X and spin it around this way, that's what the X is going to do. It's like a handle that you grab, and it'll go around this way. If we grab the Z, which we can see over here in this viewport, then the ring would go this way, and then the Y over here would go this way. It would tumble toward us, spin around, or spin this way, like spinning in place on the Z. Hopefully that makes sense, but you can do really quick animations and test that for yourself if you want. I'm going to jump up here to the number of frames at 120. Now, that part gets tricky because later on in the Movie Maker, we're going to ask you how many frames per second you want. Now, coming from an animation background, I am of the belief that you should do 1 frame for every portion of time that you want. In other words, let me say that better. Let's say we want a 4-second animation. Well, I'm not going to do 60 frames and then tell it I want 15 frames per second, because that would time out to be 4 seconds. What it's doing is doubling frames. What you should do is this. If you want a 4-second animation, seeing as how 1 second of animation is 30 frames, then we would do 120 to get 4 seconds of animation. Then later on in the Movie Maker, I'll show you where we pick 30 frames per second, not another number. So 120 frames, 4 seconds, 150, 5, 186, and so on. So I'm just going to do a 4-second animation at 400 by 400, and there's the viewport that it's going to render with. I called it test, so I'm going to enter 360 in the box. Okay, so the name of my animation frames is test. It's going to go 360 around, and at that point we can hit animate. And if you want to see what this looks like, you can just grab the slider and it'll slide around like so. Now if you want it to spin this way to begin with, then what we should do is go back to configure, and we'd put a minus in this box. So now it's going to go around minus 360. Come up to animate, slide it, and now it goes that way. Okay. At this point you can record the viewport, and it'll do a quick animation of the recorded viewport just like so. And if you're doing some kind of crazy animation, you would want to do that, because there's no sense rendering until you're satisfied that all your animation tests are good to go. If you switch it to render, then that means, you know, I'm pretty confident that this is going to work out, because there it is. Now you will notice that my ring is centered in the viewport and it's spinning on its own axis. The beauty of doing an animation, okay, in with spinning the object itself, is that you can move the object off center and yet it'll still spin. Oh, my bad. That would work, but if you recall, I said use the current viewport camera and target. So if you want to try something new, okay, then you have to re-input that. In other words, if I want to try this, then I have to go use current viewport. Now, when I come over to animate and slide this, the ring is still spinning on its own, so I can't spin it wrong. It's just off to the side of the screen. Okay, so now let's move this back over and center it up. So no matter what, the ring's going to spin on its own axis. It's just up to me to make sure that it looks centered in the viewport. Now let's go back to Edit, use current viewport, go back to Animate, rather, and now it's back over here and it's spinning still on its own. Alright, there's how I like to set up just some generic animations to spin. Obviously we could save this setup and use it over and over again to make a website of rings that are all spinning the same way. I'm going to hit record and hit pause, and then we'll finish it up. Okay, so now my animation is done. Here's the last frame, which is actually same as the first frame. So now what we need to do is go over to this icon, which is our movie maker. So we'll click that, and here's the movie maker, and we're going to go to pick files, and let's go over to, let me browse for this, users, my documents, matrix 6. There's my old one, file prefix. And then you'll notice that I've got alpha in here, and that really bugs me. That's part of the alpha mask. So let me show you how. Okay, so here I am with test, and I have alpha and no alpha. And so what I do is I go up into the search box and do a search for alpha, and it'll select all those. And then we'll go Control A for select all, and I'll delete those. Okay, so now when I come over here, all you do is you click on the first one. Don't select them all. Pick the first item and hit open. And it says, hey, this appears to be an image sequence. Do you want to import the sequence? Yes, I do. And so there is the rest of them. Here's what I was talking about earlier in the animation. I'm going to do 30 frames per second. So I'll have a 4-second animation. This is the quality of the compression. 1 is the least amount of compression, or the best looking, and also the largest file. So I'm going to go down to about 3 and hit make movie. And we'll call this one test. And we wait. So you can see it's working. Dot, dot, dot. Here it comes. And let me make sure this is in the viewport here. There's my animation. And you can see that no matter where it is on the screen, it's spinning about its own origin. And we've got some good highlights going by, but nothing too crazy. No big black spots really going by. And pure white background as well. So that helps as well. Alrighty.